After years of battling complex PTSD, anxiety, depression, and grief from the loss of 4 brothers, Jennifer found unexpected healing through art therapy. A simple art exercise at Premier Arts Collective's Kaleidoscope event became the turning point, unlocking emotions words could never reach. Today, she's off medication, pursuing a degree in counseling with a focus on art therapy and passionate about helping others heal. Her journey is living proof that healing is happening. Let's dive into our conversation with Jennifer McGraw. Well, hello.
Hi.
Thank you for doing this. I just read your bio prior to cutting to our actual conversation, but would love to hear from you. Tell me a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, all of that.
I'm Jennifer. I am a mom of 4. I'm married, hairstylist, currently in school for psychology to get my bachelor's and then hopefully also get my master's in art therapy.
Woo-woo.
Um, have really struggled, in life with anxiety, panic, depression, grief. And that's kind of what brought me around to art therapy, and that's why I'm here.
Yeah. I appreciate your willingness to share your story, talk about the past of pain and brokenness, but I also have the gift of knowing where you're at in your story now and how you're on the path of healing. And so very thankful and honored that you're willing to be here and vulnerable and share some of that. So start off with the loss. You've experienced loss, some that you've said in your bio that we just read, of your brothers, others maybe that you haven't shared. Share a little bit more about loss in your life and then how that impacted and shaped you and your journey.
I would say like loss probably sums up a good bit of my entire story. It kind of seems to be surrounding all around grief. I lost my first brother when I was 17, a senior in high school. He got in a car wreck that day. It was the first loss I'd experienced in general. That was one of the hardest times in my life, just being, 17 and trying to figure out who you are. And then that kind of happens, that your whole life shifts. He, we had hung out all together that day, and then we got the call a little bit later, and he was gone. Then that's, anxiety has always been a part of my life, but that definitely pushed me into always worrying, trying to figure out who was going to be next. Back then, we didn't have like GPS on our phones. Maybe had flip phones, but I would call people. If they didn't answer, I'd start calling hospitals. I would be convinced that, someone was in a wreck. Started getting a little bit of healing. Life started feeling a little bit more like normal. Met my husband now. We were getting ready to get married. And the night before the wedding, my younger brother left the rehearsal dinner with his girlfriend and best friend, and they got into a car wreck, and him and his girlfriend died. The friend lived, and I mean, we all drove up on the wreck. Had said bye to him, love him, and then my husband, or at that time about to be, called me and said, "Hey, don't go through the 4-way stop. Like, there's a wreck there." And we were actually going to get mattresses so I could slide down the stairs at my mom's house, like me and my sisters, and we were gonna have like a kids' night, like pillow fights, all of it. And so we were like, "Oh, well, we'll drive through, because it's probably someone that we know." when we pull up, the truck was covered with a sheet. You couldn't see it. But you just knew. Like,
Mm.
I remember trying to run through the caution tape and a firefighter like bear hugging me onto the ground. Because, it was like, what if it's not him? Like, what if it was his friend? How do they know? Yeah, and our entire family drove up on it. It That night is the night that I would say that my, I guess formal is CPTSD was born, because it confirmed every fear. I mean, if death can come like in the middle of joy and marriage and union, and then that means that it can come at any time. And, and then it still did 2 other times with 2 other brothers. It just was consistent. And so, most of the time we can use our rational brain that says, oh, well, what are the chances of that happening? And, and you lose one and you're like, oh, okay, that's it then. That's my story. And then you lose another. And then, it's like breaking a cup or a plate. You can maybe glue the pieces back together one time, but then every time you break it, the pieces get much more smaller, more fragmented, and much harder to put back together. And it's like, but it could happen again and again and again. So then when anxiety kicks in and tells me, like, I say it does, my brain does the funny thing 'cause, with kids, that's how we just talk about anxiety or panic in my house. It will say, you better call this person. If you know, they may die today, or if you don't do this, then they're going to die and it's going to be your fault, because that's what grief does, or at least in my story, you think you're powerful enough to stop it.
Tell me more about that. Like I need to call this person or otherwise this could happen. I mean, what are some of the things how did you respond to two? And then you mentioned you had two other siblings pass after.
Yeah, so 4 total by the time I was 30.
Wow.
So from 17 to 28.
How did you respond? Or were they all brothers?
Yes. So I have a very big family. There's 11 siblings. It's a blended family. And so it can get really complicating of trying to explain, who is blood, who's step, who's half. And really, at the end of the day, it doesn't even really matter. My mom and stepdad were together for as long as I can remember. Like, I don't remember life without him. So really, all of my siblings, regardless, have just always been my siblings.
Yeah.
Um,
So as the sister, and knowing that your response to the first was anxiety, how can this be fixed? And then have it happen 3 more times. I mean, where's your mind? Where's your heart in response to those things?
I mean, that's kind of like a journey, I would say, of depending on which one. The first one, I was, mad at God. God's not for me. I was very lost. The second one, I think, is what when I started really trying to find God. After he had died, my younger brother looked at me that night. It was actually the next day, and he said, Jennifer, please don't tell me you're going to renounce your faith because of this. And that was like, wow, I really, I mean, I believed in God, but I clearly was not walking the walk if he thought it was going to be that quick.
Had you recently become a Christian at that time?
I was saved when I was around 14. So, I mean, I believed in God, but then after the first brother died, I kind of was like, all right, I didn't really know God, and really up until that point, I would almost say I didn't have interest in getting to know him. I thought, um, I feel like Matt dying at that point, I thought God did this to me.
Mm.
Like, why did he take him? Um, Me and Matt kind of would joke around that we both were like the black sheep of the family. And so, even that day, we talked about it. And so I knew him, or believed in God, but also was kind of just like, but maybe he's still just not for me. And then I slowly started kind of opening up to that, love and kids will kind of make you rethink everything. And so realizing what kind of household we wanted to raise our kids in and that kind of stuff, those kind of things started playing out. And then, so when Stephen, he was the second brother when he passed, that's when I started to look for God. I would love to say that in that moment, or in that journey, that God just, took away all the anxiety and panic and was like, but unfortunately for me, he didn't. And so it was years after that, really till the last few years, that my life was defined by panic and anxiety, self-harm behaviors. I mean, um, just on that spiral.
What did that look like day in, day out?
Trying to quiet it a lot of times, but having a big family, and my mom and stepdad had their own business, so they were, weren't home a lot. All of us kids kind of raised each other. So because of that, when kids are left to their own devices, before we had devices, they, a lot of substance abuse struggles, but I was younger in the group. I had two under me. So I kind of watched the older ones struggle with that. So that awareness kind of, I think, is what kind of, like, I would dabble in stuff, but never to the point that I ever relied on anything, but still just trying to quiet it. One of I guess it wasn't a substance abuse, but I would say that for years, my addiction or coping skill was cutting.
Hmm.
That was how I could cope with the feelings. Your brain can only focus on one thing at a time, and so the blood or the pain of cutting, like the physical pain, was easier to feel than the mental pain. And so, and I didn't even, I mean, this was before cutting was even like a thing.
Yeah.
It started very young. So I guess, there's even some biological components of, when the anxiety started or how that worked. Because it was before death or anything, the grief just amplified everything that was already there. And I just didn't know how to deal with it. And so that was the only way that I knew for years.
So cutting being, and I know what cutting is. I remember, in middle and high school, it was a thing. Like it was, and I don't know if it was a thing before then, but I definitely remember, wondering, I wonder why he or she always wears hoodies or doesn't wear shorts. And so, but share a little bit more about what cutting is and what it was for you. And, you mentioned the physical component, the physical pain was either outweighed or distracted from the mental pain. What, yeah, why do you think that was the escape for you and others who have struggled with it? I know plenty you have. Um, and I know it can be different for everyone.
Um, I'd I'd say I kind of stumbled upon it accidentally. It started, like I said, in a young age. It would be, the tips of lead pencils or, you know, even to rubber bands, um, but anything that just had an edge that I could just like rub and break the skin. Um, I didn't realize at the time that it was when I was upset or in trouble until a family member kind of pointed it out one day. She had saw a letter that I'd carved in my skin and kind of was like, "Hey, what's that about?" And then she had really kind of explained what cutting was and self-harm behavior at this point. I was in middle school. Um, and she had well intentions, absolutely. But for me, I would say that that made it worse. Because then I had a connection. Before it was just opportunity, boredom, you had to have something in your hand, you like all those things. Well, then I connected, oh, when I'm not feeling good, I get this release. So then that started where it started getting out of hand. Like I would keep a little box of sharps, like little just different things that would be hidden in my bathroom. And, I wouldn't be at home and something bad would happen. It'd be like, I just can't wait to get home to cut. And it didn't, of course, there were times that it was more severe, you know, but it didn't have to be one level or another. It was just, um, I sometimes say it's like a smoker, like whenever they've had a stressful day and you see them take that like first puff of the
Yeah.
cigarette and it's like, oh, um,
I was just about to ask, like, did it play itself out as an addiction?
yeah, absolutely. And later on in my life, it, helped me understand addiction even more. Um, it very much, it's just, society, it's ugly, like cigarette smoking, it's an addiction, but it just happens on the inside, so we don't see what it does to your lungs. Cutting is not pretty, and so we demonize it. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's more scary. And of course, then people then connect it with suicidal behaviors, stuff like that. But for me, that wasn't that wasn't a part of my motivation. Um, but yeah, it for years it would just become my first go-to thing. Um it's just been a large part. I mean, now I've been well, it's 25. So it's been 6 years since I've cut. I had made it almost 10 years without cutting. It was crazy because with talking about it being an addiction, so every time I'd get upset, there would be so many times I'd be so tempted. I would daydream about it almost. It'd be like, I wonder if I could cut and hide it and my husband not know, which marriage is pretty hard to hide parts of your body. Like, but I would, if I could have been able to cut and know that he wouldn't have seen it, I absolutely would have. Um, and so, after kids, it was like, I didn't want all these ugly scars all over my body. I mean, the ones that I have, fine. And I use that to tell them and explain it to them. But then after almost 10 years and one night, a big fight, with my husband that an impulsive decision, that, lack of a better word, I relapsed.
Hmm.
Um, it's like that, and that it's not what you're supposed to be doing. Like, I would say, much like an addict, I had enough sense about me to try to block the door and, all these things. But, chairs don't really block the door if it's on a tile floor, just FYI. And so in the middle of it, my husband walked in, and I'd really actually forgot about this part until recently when me and him talked about it. And I was sitting on the floor. We'd been on a date night, so, I have a dress on. It's all, I had gotten all prettied up, and I'm um, sitting on the floor in the dress, and he walks in, or I mean, barged in, and all I felt was shame and embarrassment. The one thing that had always given me a release really kind of just piled more stuff on at that point, because there was no release. The cool thing about it, I would say the God thing in that moment, that I didn't realize actually in that moment, was the closure of it. That after going so long, and I daydreamed about cutting and thought about it and obsessed about it, that I realized that it's not a part of my story anymore, because it really just hurt like hell. And all I felt was just intense shame to say that I'd made it that far, and then just an impulsive move to do it. And but it didn't, it didn't offer any relief. And I, think that uh, that's often people who struggle with substance abuse. That's how it kind of happens. They'll think about it, and then an impulsive decision. It's like
Yeah.
done.
In that 10 years, if you don't mind me asking, you mentioned daydreaming and thinking about it. I mean, were you white knuckling, holding on for those 10 years? Was something else filling that void, if you will, that cutting gave you?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I tried some techniques like the rubber band on your wrist and you smack it or you snap it. I'd say alcohol. While I wouldn't say that I really had a problem with it or struggled with it, but it definitely still, helped to quiet it. Yeah, I mean, I truly obsessed about it. It was always in the back of my head, like, would it give me relief? And you think that it will, because that's like the little devil on your shoulder that's like, this is the only thing that understands you. This is the only thing that will give you relief. Nothing else will. No one else gets you. Um, and so I was able to fight it, for a while.
Did you know of anybody else, or did you communicate with anybody that you were doing that?
No.
Isn't that like that's something that it feels like the ultimate tactic of the enemy is isolation.
Absolutely.
Because it's nobody knows what this is like. Only you.
Yeah.
This it's only this thing, and just how in that of when you say cutting, I'm like, oh yeah, like I can think of 4 or 5 people right now off the top of my head. And with so many other addictions, that are kept in the dark, it's nobody gets it. Like this is the only thing for you, in isolation in that. And so I find it interesting, just as the listener, to hear that and hear you say, this was kind of the devil on my shoulder. And then I guess a question to you: do you think that if your husband hadn't walked in, that it would have, like, do you think that, yes, you felt shame, yes, you feel guilt, and also it's like, oh, thank God, like I've kind of been found out. And like,
Yeah.
you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, do you think it would have still hurt if it was
Mm.
just in isolation? Or do you think Jamie seeing that and you're like, oh, now that this has been exposed, when darkness comes into the light, you realize, like, it's like the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
This big, dark, scary thing, it's just some dude behind a curtain. Like, do you think that happened with you with cutting? I don't want to put words in your mouth. But
No, I mean, possible. It's hard to say. I would say that addiction, the opposite of addiction is connection. So it thrives on darkness. It
Yeah.
needs it. And that's how a lot of people get out of control with it. They become really good at hiding it. I would love to say that I was healed enough that to realize it, but I don't know. But there was so much about that night that is really a testament to God and how he just kind of lines things up perfectly. And even, all things work for his good. So even though it was a horrible, horrible night, that night, there was so much going on that caused, I say that it was impulsive. The cutting was impulsive, but there was so much that had been building for a few years that I thought that I was going crazy. And it was in my marriage, and but at that time I didn't know. I mean, I thought that I was legit going crazy. And come to find out, my husband had been struggling with substance abuse for several years. I was thinking it was affairs. It was like all these other things. I had literally no idea. He had a brother that passed also, and a mom that substance abuse played into it. So I never thought that it would be in my household, so it had to be anything but that. And what the night of cutting did was it allowed me to understand that that night happened about a week before the veil was lifted on him. And I don't know if that night hadn't happened, how I would have been able to deal. It just helped me understand it.
What do you mean by that?
Just needing that release, and realizing that me cutting or, him with whatever, they were still coming from the same place, they're just different vices. But yet, I wanted to judge his more harshly, but it was then to, who am I? And so it just allowed me to understand, well, to have empathy for his pain. Was there, I would say that can even almost slightly minimize the feelings. Was it that I only just felt empathy for him? No, I was still pretty pissed off. This was almost like an agreement, when we were going to having kids. No, this is not going to be in our house.
Yeah.
So it was still really hard, and it is not like it was just, but that night still just helped me have a little bit different of a perspective.
Hey, gallery listeners, I want to take a quick pause in the episode and invite you to join our mission of using the arts as a vehicle of healing and hope. Your gift will directly support our therapeutic arts programs and our initiatives around the world. To financially partner with us, visit our website at premierarchcollective.com/give and check out the link in the show notes. Here, you can give a one-time gift or become a member of the curated, our monthly giving community. Thank you so much. So, you alluded that substance abuse with your older siblings was something that you witnessed, and then now it's a part of your marriage where you leave that family and start your own, and then here it is. What was that journey like? Did those two worlds connect in any way?
Um, yeah. So, I mean, growing up with siblings with substance abuse, there's just,
Did they hide it from you, or did you know
no,
it?
it was
Yeah.
very, did I know to the extent it was? No, but, we were definitely back then a partying family. My mom was known for throwing really good kegers, um, and so it was kind of more normalized. And so really, I mean, a lot of my siblings struggled with it. So two of my brothers were always very protective over me. Um, Matt was one of them. He's the first one that passed, and the other one, for a long time, I just thought that he wanted to cause me pain, wanted to hurt me. They would essentially discipline me. I would say that they definitely probably crossed the line a few times physically. But it was, you have a teenager who's got their own struggles, and then you add substances in there and it's a hot mess. And so my my brother Brandon, uh I would say he is the one that I had the most roller coaster relationship with, that would just be so mean, for years. And I would avoid him. Family functions, if he was coming, I wasn't there, because I would be his target, and um, he would call and say these horrible things to me. Christmas Day, it would be like, oh, it should have been you that died, not Matt. Um, so I I would almost say the word hate. But again, God, and how he just kind of uses everything for his good. So before I'd found out about my husband, about a year prior to that, Brandon got sober. And he had called me and he had told me that what he was doing and what he had been involved in, and what his plan was, and really just kind of like opened up his heart, like why, the things that happened to him, what he struggled with. And we had kind of started to bond then, but at that point I still didn't really view him as a safe person. It was like, oh, I've heard this story, like you're in the corner right now. um but then when I found out about Jamie, he was the first person I called because um he's an expert, and so I called him, and the very first feeling that I felt was fear.
When you called Brandon?
When I first found out, I'd found some things in a bag that Jamie had tried to throw away. Because, like I said, I thought I was going crazy, so I thought it was an affair, so I go searching. Um, and so I called Brandon almost, it was like, how do I save his life? Because in my mind, like I don't even know if it's just in my mind. That road only leads to death. That's just it. Um, and so Brandon told me, all right, here's what you got to do, and here's how you're going to present it. I mean, word for word, to the point he's like, and then look, this is the ace in your back pocket, but you don't want to use it because you don't want to put him on the defense. And, so then that night when Jamie got home, I just presented it to him and was like, look, this scares me and I need you to tell me what's going on. I mean, I'd like a script, just exactly what
From your brother.
Yep. And Jamie looked at me and he just said, okay, what do I got to do?
Wow.
And I mean, I don't know if me and Jamie would still be married right now if not for my brother. It's a different way that you see your sibling versus your spouse when it comes to that. Like you would think that your spouse gets all the forgiveness in the world, but they're also the ones that you hold more accountable too, because you're like, no, like we're in this agreement together, so no. By far, I would say that was the hardest time in my entire life. Even past the grief, you lose someone and they're gone. Like there's no actions that you have to take in that. You can't bring them back.
Right.
Walking the road of recovery and how to love someone through it and have grace. All while trying to manage your own anxiety and panic and raise kids and work and all those things. Like it was not easy.
Yeah, tell me more about what walking that path was. So this is, if I got my numbers correct, you said 2019?
Yes. The panic attacks. So there was the anxiety always, but the panic attack started also in 2019, shortly before finding out about his struggle. Looking back, it's like there was just too much going on, I think, in my body. I was trying to manage the anxiety. I wouldn't take medications. And, I'm like, no, I need to be strong enough. I would try talk therapy on and off. But that would really just turn into me like complaining about my day, like, which I'm a hairstylist. So I get to do that all the time. And so for a little bit, they kind of stopped. I think that then I went into survival mode. And it was so much about just keeping him alive, even though his was not to that level, but in my head, he was there.
Well, I mean, thinking back to what you mentioned with grief, and it was like, how can I control this Yeah.
I mean, he was great from the very get-go. I mean, he, was like, what do I got to do? And he had to jump through some hoops for sure. And he was always willing to do it, but it just wasn't easy. The person that you trust always have your back, and, and even though he still had my back essentially, that was like, how can I trust him then? Like, what about with the kids? And that takes a long time to get over. And I think that that's something that you don't really expect. You think, oh, well, once they're, sober or clean, everything's going to be great. And it's like, yeah, no, it's way harder like a year down the road when you're like, oh, now that I'm out of survival mode and now my body is all of a sudden producing all this adrenaline that like one day you're just sitting on the couch watching a movie and your heart starts pounding, your chest is heavy, start throwing up everywhere to the point that I go to urgent care because I think I'm having a heart attack. Like, and then that went on for about 2 years, roughly.
How frequently?
So once I had one that would hit, it was like I'd stayed in this heightened state for a few days. So then it would be driving the boys to school and have a trash bag in my lap because I might just start vomiting.
Gosh.
It and that's the thing with panic attacks, you can't predict them. Anxiety, you can kind of figure out like, oh, there's a trigger here. You feel it kind of building. Panic attacks, I mean, you could be having the best day of your life.
Really?
You can just be sitting here right now and just bam, like,
So there's no like, oh man, if it's a stressful day, I
no,
need to take a step back because when this is coming, it
no.
comes on.
Panic attacks, from my understanding, is just your body's physical response to built up adrenaline. So it is all of a sudden your brain thinks that a bear is chasing you, and there is no bear. But you go into complete survival mode, and all that adrenaline that you would typically use if a bear was chasing you is going through your body. Well, if you're just sitting here and you get that surge of adrenaline, there's all of your symptoms of panic attacks. At that point, I was where I had to do medication. It just wasn't maintainable. And so started some antidepressants, and then also anxiety medication to take when you're in the middle of a panic attack. I think that those years, though, is what caused me to really start to work on myself and heal and start that path. Like, for so many years, it was always about everyone else, fix everyone else, heal everyone else. As long as you're good, I'm good. And then I just, one, I couldn't fix him, like I would have loved to, but I couldn't. And oh man, the amount of money that we spent on addiction therapy for me to learn that one, with checking his eyes or, are his eyes bloodshot today? It will drive the person crazy. It drove me crazy. It drives everyone else around you crazy. And so realizing that I couldn't do it. And so at that point, as cliche as it sounds, you work on yourself because that's the only thing that you can control in that moment.
So what was that like, turning inward?
Oh, that's really scary.
Hmm.
No, I mean, it got harder before it got better. You have to kind of confront some of your stuff and stuff that you bury deep down that you don't want anyone ever to know.
Are you doing this in community? Is this a church thing? Is this therapy? Is it counseling?
All of the above. So traditional talk therapy I did for years, on and off. Like I said, it just really never went anywhere. I did some EMDR, which is, good for trauma. But still just didn't really find anything until I found art therapy. By then, my panic attacks, when I started it, I was on the medication. So they had started to kind of go down, I guess, but I was still very much in a heightened state. I think that through that, though, is what then allowed me to be able to come off of all medication, which now has been a little over 2 years that a little over a year, like fast forwarding, that I've been able to be off meds. I haven't had a panic attack in a while. Do I still struggle with anxiety? Yep, all the time. So I would not say that I'm healed. But I'm also, I don't know if this is negative sounding. I also don't know if that will ever happen on this side of heaven. Like, maybe, I'd compare myself, not, sometimes I relate to Paul in the Bible that talks about the thorn in his flesh, and he, asked God to take it multiple times, and it just wasn't happening God, to keep him humble. So I guess I needed to be humbled. But I, for years, just was like, why, God? Like, why are you going to give this to me? Like, I could do so much more if I didn't have this anxiety, social anxiety, panic attacks, Um, but that's also what made me who I am and brought me to where I'm at. And so I don't know if he'll ever take it away, but maybe he will. He's definitely take the panic away for at least the time being. Um, but then you just become more sensitive to it. So now though, you kind of learn, all right, like feeling a little anxious, I'm able to talk about it a whole lot easier. Usually the rule of thumb is if I'm talking about it, it's because I'm not feeling it. But then when I isolate and that's then, I kind of know that it's getting bad. Sometimes that means that I do take some self-care days. Sometimes that means I acknowledge it and tell my husband, like, all right. It just kind of depends on the time. Sometimes it's easy to pick out the trigger, going on vacation, leaving the kids somewhere, and it's like, all right, things are going to be a little rough for a few days. I just need to chill out and be close with the kids because that's definitely a comfort for me. I like to know that they're safe. My eyes have to like be on them. I'm sure that still goes back to some of my trauma of grief that it's like, all right, well, like if they're with me, then I can keep them safe. Which that's, the effects of all of that still today, I would say that I struggle with is that it's still my responsibility to keep everyone safe, So even if I don't want to go somewhere, if I don't show up, then what happens if someone at the party wants to drink and drive and then I'm not there to stop them? Like, so still carry on a lot of that it's like my responsibility. So, I mean, God and art therapy, are both still working on me with that of
Yeah.
it's, I like to think that I'm in control and that I have this power to change someone's fate. So it's like an illusion of control, which, I mean, I would say that all addiction, cutting, it's all an illusion of like some big magic trick like that, you're gonna get relief and it's gonna like be, I don't know, like a dream. Like I think of like being on the beach and like, you're putting your feet in the sand and it's like gonna be warm and comforting, and that's what that drink is gonna give you or cutting is gonna give you. And reality, it gives you a prison. Like, yeah. But I mean, God still places everything that you need in your life, like at the right times, and like sets that path, which is just, hindsight's 2020 because you don't see it in the moment, like the years of hating my brother and all of that, and then to have him, like the one thing that kept us apart for all those years is the very thing that like brought us together. And he even said to me, because, oh my gosh, I would call him like every day, like almost like reporting back, like, what do I do now? What do I do now? And he had said, if he went through everything that he did just to be able to help me walk through it, then it was all worth it. And it's just crazy, like when you think about how God will just use all of the bad things for his good. Like, who would have thought, having a brother struggle with substance abuse for years and years and years, and the pain that caused, and the anger and hurt, isolation, like all of it, would be something that I would almost be thankful for, because like I said, he was like an expert,
Yeah. So our paths intersect. Pack and your path intersect right where you find art therapy. So tell me more about what that was like. Had you heard of art therapy before? Thank you so much for listening, and we hope you enjoyed part 1 of our conversation with Jennifer McGraw. Part 2 will be dropping soon. And if you want to be notified exactly when that episode releases, subscribe to the gallery wherever you find good podcasts. In the meantime, feel free to share this with a friend, share it on social media, and if you'd be so kind, write us a review, as that will help expand the listener reach of our podcast. Thank you so much.